5 years ago, I sold everything. My house, my personal property, and I bought an RV. If it didn't fit in the RV, it got sold, gave it away, or donated. I did not want to rent a storage locker and have monthly rent. During those 5 years, I always kind of yearned to have kind of a place I could call home. And I decided that someday I'd like to buy some acreage, some significant acreage, and build a Barndominium on it, big enough that I could park my RV in, maybe a few campsites, some RV sites where I could park at for my family and friends, and maybe even rent them out to make in some side income. Hi, this is Comet Troy. Guess what? I'm finally realizing my dream. I bought 35 acres in Middle Tennessee at the end of 2021, and I'm in the process of building a small RV park and Barndominium. So if you're here for RV park design or Barndominium design, you're in the right place. But before you can design an RV park and before you can design a Barndominium, you need to have some land or know where you're gonna put these two things. So we're gonna be going through some of the processes that I went through on the preparations I did before I started designing. And then towards the end of today's video, I'm actually going to show you how I designed the RV park and how I designed my own Barndominium. So if you're into Barndominiums and RV park design, stick around. I think you'll enjoy this video. This video is part 2 of the purchase video where I take you through the process that I went through as I purchased property in Tennessee. Today we're going to talk about lot 36. I talked about it in part 1 a little bit, so I'm going to actually show lot 36 in this video first, and then we're going to talk about that shack behind me. That's a little, kind of an interesting story that I'd like to share. And then in the first video, part 1, I talked about how I didn't really do a whole lot of due diligence and just kind of left everything in kind of blind faith and went forward with the sale. That's not entirely accurate as I thought about after I did that video. So I'm going to talk about some of the due diligence I did do, prior to the sale, which, wasn't much, but I'm going to share that anyway. And then after I got the contract signed, I'm going to go through some of the first steps I did in the month of November. And after that, I'm going to share kind of a little funny story with a run-in with the Tennessee law enforcement. So that should make, maybe give you a good chuckle. And then the last part is, we're going to talk about actual RV design, RV park design that I did prior to closing at the end of December. So that would be the month of December. I worked on that. So we're going to share some stuff from that. And then finally, we'll have question of the day. This is part 2 of the purchase of Linden Camp. I recorded part 1 before. I released it about a week ago. If you haven't seen part 1, that is linked down below in the description, so go check it out. It would be, a good baseline before you watch this. So before we get started, I need to give some disclaimers. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax guy. I'm not a realtor in the state of Tennessee. I'm not a broker in the state of Tennessee. I'm basically a nobody. I'm a landowner. Yes, I do have a brokerage license in Wisconsin. That doesn't apply. It's not recognized by Tennessee. So what I'm saying in my disclosure is that you're really on your own to do your own due diligence. And the stuff that I present in my videos is strictly my opinion. And you need to do your own due diligence, talk to your own attorneys, get your own legal assistants, get your own tax people, accountants, whatever. Don't be blaming any stupid decisions on me just because I said it in a video. So with that, let's get right to it. Lot 36. That was the second lot that I bought after speaking with Mayor Ward. It's 21 acres. I bought lot 36 with some IRA money. I didn't withdraw the money and have to pay taxes on it. I left it in there. I converted it to a self-directed IRA. Oh my God, this is like ridiculous. Blooper roll. I had this bright idea to, tape a piece of paper to the phone with my notes on it so I could read them. And I thought it was ingenious. I have a couple paper clips attached to the phone. I have one at the bottom to weight it down. And then a breeze comes and it's just a disaster. It wiggles my phone like a sail. The paper goes up in front of the lens, just like it's doing now. And oh my God, this is like ridiculous. I should just do this tomorrow when there's no wind. When I bought lot 36, I didn't exactly know what I was going to do with it. It just felt like the right thing to do. And I could always, if it turned out to be a bad decision or it's not something I wanted to do, I could always, flip it and sell it down the road, hopefully, make a little bit of profit on it. My overwhelming thought though was I wanted to build it into a mini campground with 4 campsites on it, and like a picnic shelter and maybe a bathhouse, and then rent the entire 21 acres to one person at a time for a bachelor party or a hunting party or a family reunion, where you could come and have the whole 21 acres to yourself to basically do whatever you want. And that was where I was kind of going with that. Now, as I sit here today at the end of April, I'm up to my eyeballs trying to develop lot 24 into a campground. That's the 35 acres. And I'm thinking that I maybe bit off more than I can chew here with 2 lots and doing that and this at the same time. I'm showing some overhead videos right now. It's kind of in the middle is where I envision, setting up some camping sites. And then as it pans up higher, you'll see like a turnaround area kind of in the middle of the property. And as we even go to a higher elevation, you'll see that, the tip of the land makes kind of like a spade shape, like a spade in a deck of cards. And so near the road is during the back, and as we climb higher, you'll see the road is at the bottom of the screen. So the way that the bottom of the screen is actually south, and the top of the screen is north. So this is an improvement that came with Linden Camp, a little hunting shack. How cool is that? Now, an improvement, if you're not familiar with real estate terms, is things that you would build on a property, such as a house is called an improvement. A swimming pool, even a fence you put around your yard is an improvement. Anything that improves the value that's not the land is called an improvement. Now, it's debatable whether it actually improves the value of the land or not, but for my sake, I'm going to say that it does. I think I can rent this out on VRBO for maybe, I don't know, $50 a night. Any takers? I don't know if any of you are on TikTok, but before I just got my YouTube channel going, I was playing with TikTok. I actually did kind of a cool video in that hunting shack behind me with a remote worker. I moved my laptops in there and I had to do some country songs. So if you're on TikTok, I have a link to that video in the description below. In part 1 of the video, I talked a lot about putting blind faith in Tennessee Land and Lakes and buying, just buying the property. I wanted to expand on that a little bit more because there are some things that you can do, things that I did, to prepare myself. I didn't go in there completely blind, and I'm going to share some of those things now that I did. So one of the first things I did after I contacted the Tennessee Land and Lakes, and they told me about the property, where it was located. They showed me kind of, a plat that hadn't been divided up yet, is I went on Zillow and I looked in that area, and Zillow has a thing where you can see properties that are for sale and you can do different filters, land only. So I went into Zillow and I identified, a bunch of vacant land lots that were for sale in the immediate area. And then, as you click on them, it gives you the listing agent. I'm a realtor. I didn't want Zillow to assign me a buyer's agent, so I just didn't want to go down that road. And so I got the numbers of the listing agents for each of the properties I was interested in. I called those agents and asked about the property, you know, asked them when I can see it, yada, yada, yada. And that actually worked pretty well. And just a little note about Tennessee Land and Lakes. They're called Tennessee Land and Lakes because they have 3 different developments. They have a development in Nashville. They have the Buffalo River development, which is where I purchased my 2 lots. And then they also have what's called the Landings, which is right on the Tennessee River. They call it Kentucky Lake, actually. It's in Tennessee. It's a little confusing to me. It's called Kentucky Lake. It's the Tennessee River. It's in Tennessee. But anyway, they have a division there. The lakes part of Tennessee Lakes is they're selling lots, RV lots that are on the lake. So when Tennessee Land and Lakes first contacted me, I was still up in Wisconsin, and I'd learned about the 2 types of divisions, and I really didn't know whether I wanted, you know, lake property or I wanted acreage, or ideally both. I mean, how cool would it be to have, you know, 10 acres that has a river or a lake, you know, flowing through it, or you have some lake frontage and you're still away from people? Well, unless you have millions of dollars, that property doesn't exist. I found that out pretty quickly. So I had to make a decision. Do I want lake or do I want, you know, woods and privacy and acreage? Now the big difference between the Buffalo River area that I'm on, where I have 35 acres and 21 acres, is the landing is more waterfront property. So instead of acres, you're buying square footage there. So they're quite a bit smaller. So if you want, you know, if you want spread out, you want privacy, you buy at you know, at the Buffalo River area, where you can buy acreage. If you want, you know, waterfront, if that's more your thing, then you would, you know, buy at the Landings. And their lots are 19,200 square feet, 0.44 acres. So a little bit less than a half an acre you can get at the Landings. So then I came down to the area, still not knowing if I wanted lake or I wanted acreage. One of the first properties I went and looked, and actually the only property I actually stepped foot on while I was down here before Tennessee Land and Lakes, was a 1 acre parcel. And it wasn't even on the Tennessee River. It was on a river that flowed into the Tennessee River itself. The realtor meets me. She shows me the property, and then she talks to the neighbor, and then she leaves. And so I'm there on the lot all by myself, right? So after the realtor gets done talking to the neighbor comes out and starts talking to me. He's like telling me, he's like, oh yeah, well, you know, we don't want any you know, hoodlums around here, and you know, we got shotguns, and you know, we shoot at people that are causing problems, and you know, I don't really know what your intentions are of this property, and you know, what are you gonna do with it? I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm thinking about making like a campground, but geez, I can't really tell him that. He's just gonna like blow a gasket. So, you know, the bottom line is that, you know, within 30 minutes of stepping foot on this property, I had a neighbor coming over and telling me what I can and can't do with the property, in his opinion. I mean, obviously I can do whatever I want, but a lot of living in a community is getting along with your neighbors. And, you know, he was already setting up boundaries and rules and, you know, this and that for me. I'm like, at that point, I made my decision of which way I was going to go. Ultimately, I passed on that, but that did help me make my decision of, you know, large acreage or water frontage. And I ended up going the large acreage route. I mean, if water frontage is your cup of tea and having neighbors close by, then so be it. I mean, that works for a lot of people, and I get it. I'm not knocking that at all. It just wasn't what I was looking for, of building a campground and having some significant acreage to go by. The next agent I contacted had 168 acres available for, I don't know, I think it was like 140 or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, this would be so cool. I could get, because I was looking at, you know, Tennessee Land and Lakes, you know, I might be spending that amount of money for, you know, 21 acres like I did. Here I can get 168 acres for, you know, for 140,000. I'm like, oh my God, you know, this is what I should do. So I called up about it, and you know, the realtor says, yeah, it's 168 acres, but it's all marsh and it floods, and you know, I I wouldn't buy it if I were you. So then I went back and I found another lot of properties that one listing agent had. They had like 20 different lots listed, similar to what Tennessee Land and Lakes has and them calls. So I finally get a hold of the listing agent and I inquire about the lots. He's like, well, someone came in and bought all the lots. So, there I lost that opportunity. I mean, did I really waste time? I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that was just, getting my mind in the right mindset and right place to actually go forward with the Tennessee Land and Lake sale, which I did. So you've got your land under contract and now you're waiting for the closing date to come up. What can you do for, in that 6-week period to 2-month period? Well, I'll tell you what I did. First thing I did was get all the loan application stuff together for the mortgage. And I created the LLCs after that. So I created one LLC for each property. The first thing that I felt that I wanted to do was get access to the property. I wanted to be able to drive in from the road and not have my truck get all scratched up from branches and whatnot. So I spent quite a bit of time just clearing the path out. After I got access cleared to the property, I started walking around, just getting kind of a rough idea of what was going to go where, and I got a rough idea of the size of the building that I could build up front by the road. I knew I wanted to build an RV shop where I could park my RV and work on it, but I didn't know how big a shop I could build. So I went out there and I did the big steps as you're walking through, which is typically 3 feet. So I'm like, okay, well, that was 21 steps times 3, so that'd be 63 feet. And I'm like, all right, so I can put about a 63-foot building here and walk it off the other way. It's like, okay, that's about 16 steps, or what would that be, 32, 48 feet. And then I would take pictures. So you can turn on location services with your photos, and it will actually record up to the GPS coordinates of where you took the picture. And then I would go back to my hotel or my campsite, and I would bring up my land on Google Maps, and I would import those pictures, and the pictures would show up as plots on the land. So it really helped a lot for me to visualize what I was going to do with the property while I was away from it, in the comfort of my RV living room. I wanted to do. Now this all happened in November. I was living in my RV along the Tennessee River, and I bought a week first. I was just going to be here for the sale, and then I go to leave after the first week, and my RV wasn't building any air pressure. It wasn't making air, and my RV is a diesel pusher, so it requires air for the air brakes, and so I ended up staying for the whole month of November. So that ended up keeping me in Tennessee longer than I had anticipated. But everything happens for a reason, right? So now for the comical part with the red light camera I want to tell you about. So a partner of mine came down from Wisconsin. She drove down and she stayed with me for a little while for Thanksgiving and that. And then we're going to check out of the campground after being there for a month, and we're going to head down to Louisiana. So she's following me in her vehicle, and I'm driving the RV with my truck and bike behind it, and she's following me. And if you've ever driven a big RV, you know that you can't stop very, very fast. So I'm coming up to this stoplight, and it turns yellow. I'm like, oh, and it was just at that point, it's like, do I step on it or do I hit the brakes? It's like, I don't know if I can make the stop by then. That'd be kind of pushing it. I'd have to jam on the brakes pretty hard. So I just maybe gave it a little more gas, and I went through it. And just as I get up to the front line, the crosswalk, of that intersection, it turns from yellow to red, you know, as you can see here. And then I call it orange. So the light was orange when I entered the intersection. And then my partner was behind me. As you can see in the video, the light was very, very, very red when she went through it. And then a few months later, she'd chat with me on Facebook Messenger, and she's like, did you get a ticket? I'm like, a ticket? Not that I know of. Why, what are you talking about? So come to find out that she got a red light ticket. Well, I hope you enjoyed that ticket story. So let's just recap a little bit. In November, I was in Tennessee, got the contract to purchase, applied for the mortgage, a lot of boots on the ground stuff, just collecting data because I knew I was going to be leaving the area, just measuring out where things were going to go, taking pictures, and really collecting a lot of data that could be used after I leave the property. So then I left for Louisiana, got a ticket on the way, which you just saw. And now that takes me to December. December, I was, now 7 hours away. So then I wanted to take that data and process it into two designs. Number one, I wanted to design an RV park, basically laying out the land. Or the second design I wanted to do was actually design my Barndominium. Okay, so let's get into the first one. I called on an IT friend of mine to come in and help me, design the land in the RV park. We'll introduce him shortly. He has his own YouTube channel. He did the design in Google Maps, and he has a tutorial that he shows exactly how he did it. So let's try and see if I can find the IT guy that's been helping me with this. He's a little evasive, and he's always hard to find. I hear something. I hear someone. Oh, look. It's Hef, the IT guy. Hi, Hef. How's it going? Oh, hi, Comet Troy. It's been a while. It has. Hey, would you be willing to show our viewers that custom Google map you made for me on the Linden Camp property as we were planning it all out? I don't know. It's Sunday. It's my day off. I'm just relaxing, taking it easy today, just hanging out. I really don't feel like working. Pretty please, with sugar on top and a cherry. All right, if you insist. I guess I could dust off the computer and do a little bit of work and show your viewers what I did for you. Come on. It's gonna include the Google Maps part, in this video, but it just ended up being way too long. So we separated that into a separate video in his channel, which I've referenced in the description below. I'm gonna show a couple clips from that, but if you want to, see the full video, just go into the description and you can click on it and see his tutorial on Google Maps to create an RV park. Now that you met Hef, the IT guy, here is clip number 1 from his video, where we talk about the RV park and being able to switch between layers. On here, let's add on some RV sites. Originally, I designed some back in RV sites where you'd come in and you'd back in your rig and you'd have a beautiful view of the bluffs looking down here, out the side. The hollers are over here. So the way that the land laid, that you'd have this camper would have a nice view down this holler, and then this camper would have a nice view down this holler. But then I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? I'm like, wait a minute. I'm visualizing, my rig, and I'm like, well, if I back in there, my front door and my canopy and where I'm going to put my lawn chairs is going to be out here looking into the driving path. I'm like, well, that's not going to be any fun. How is that going to work, right? So I had to scrap this plan. And rather than delete them and move things around, I just made a new layer. So I could, and I thought about, pulling in front ways. You could, pull in front ways, and then you'd be facing the right direction. But then how's that going to work with a fifth wheel? How are you going to unhook your truck and, get out of there? And rather than just delete those, I put them in a different view. So I'm going to remove the RV rear view and bring in the RV front view. So what I decided to do instead was make some pull-through sites. So that's the RV park that Hef, the IT guy, created. Now for the second clip, Hef was in the process of editing his Google Maps content, and a concerned neighbor came and visited. So here's that clip.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce yourself? And who are you?
Well, my name is Donna Tucker. I am a permanent resident. I live down on River Bluff Road. And my concern is whoever has purchased lot number 27 has purchased the end of our access road. And it is our only access to McGee Road when the Buffalo River floods and covers up River Bluff Road and even part of McGee Road around the big curve. But we would appreciate our access not being cut off by permanent buildings or anything like that. We're just a little concerned that lot number 27 doesn't know he bought the end of a road.
Right.
It's not used constantly, but we do have to use it when the Buffalo floods. And it floods quite often.
Now both of those clips come from the same video in Hef the IT's guy's channel, and that that video is linked below if you want to watch the full version of it. It's almost an hour, but I think it's worth it. It's very informative, and it helps me a lot. Just an example of one of the things I've used after the fact is I needed to order a roll of water, a water line for Linden Camp, and it comes in 500-foot rolls. So I was able to go onto Google Maps, use the tape measure tool that was described in that Google Maps video, and see if the 500 roll was going to be long enough or not. And it looked like it's going to be a little short. So I need to sketch up how it's going to look. So I'm like, I should probably do this in CAD, some sort of a computer-aided drafting solution. And there's actually one called SketchUp that I actually played with. I taught myself how to do it. There was a tutorial I went through to design some playground equipment. That was kind of fun. So I go to start designing. I learned just enough to be dangerous, and I go to start designing my building, which I was calling a pole barn. I found out after the fact that it's not technically, it's called a post frame building. They don't really call them pole barns. So it's a post frame building. So I'm looking up post frame specs, how far apart are the poles. Some builders make them 8 feet, some make them 12, and then you got trusses, and I learned a lot about post frame buildings. And I'm like, okay, well now I know enough in SketchUp now, so I'm starting to extrude my own 2x6s and 2x8s and 2x4s and my poles, and I'm making my roof rafters and my floor joists, and I'm drawing all this stuff out. It's taken me hours and hours and hours. It's like, but it was fun. I was learning at the same time. And then after I spent, I don't know how many weeks, how many hours, drawing my own building, I learned about the SketchUp warehouse. The SketchUp warehouse has millions and millions of designs that people have already done, and they're all included. You just go and you click on one and you download it. So I went in there, I'm like, I wonder if they have any post frame buildings. Lo and behold, they had a 40 by 40 post frame building with all the poles, the cement foundation, the roof rafters, the sides and everything, and already laid out. I'm like, oh my God, if I would have known this, I could have saved a ton of time. but I knew enough about SketchUp at that point that I'd stretched it out from a 40 by 40 to a 40 by 60, which is the size I wanted. I made it, I increased the height from like 12 feet to 20 feet so I get my RV in there, and and then I'm like, you know, I wonder if they have any RVs out there. So I went back to the SketchUp warehouse, and lo and behold, there was all kinds of RVs. And I even found this prison bus. I'm like, oh my God, that'd be too cool. I'm gonna park a prison bus in my shop to see what it looks like and see how it fits. They had some other RVs too, but the prison bus was just more fun, and I think you'll agree. That's how I designed my Barndominium in SketchUp. So that covers the RV park and the Barndominium. Now they say hindsight is 20/20, so I can sit here in the middle of April and I can look back at that period at the end of 2021, and I asked myself, is there anything I would have done differently? And I can point to two things that I wish I had done differently. The first one is the due diligence. I wish I had done some more due diligence on the area of Tennessee. And I did that due diligence after the fact, and I got lucky, I really did. I found that an annual study where they talk about their moving truck rentals. They publish, you know, where they're being picked up at and where they're being dropped off at. That gives a really good indication of where people are leaving and you know, which states they're moving to. And Tennessee, I believe, was #1 state that people were moving to. I'm like, score, that's pretty cool. If it wasn't #1, it's in the top 5, but you know, you're probably looking at it now, and you know, it was definitely a desirable state. So I got lucky picking Tennessee there. And Van Lines, United Van Lines also has something similar, and you know, there's what they've published up there on the screen, and same kind of thing. I don't think they had Tennessee ranked as #1, but it was in the top 5. So I got really lucky with you know, picking the state of where I wanted to go to, and a lot of it was just circumstance. I wanted to be between Wisconsin and Alabama, and Tennessee was in the middle. So got lucky there. The other thing that's 20/20 in the hindsight is when I bought that second lot with the IRA money, I wish I would have instead bought one of the lake lots that Tennessee Land and Lakes is selling. That way I could have, you know, the privacy in the woods when I needed it, and if I wanted to go play on the lake for a day, I could go, you know, to my lake lot and, you know, get on the boat, go out, have some fun, whatever, in a hot July afternoon. So, and you know what, I can still do that. My option is still open. They still got some of those lake lots for sale, and you know, I can always try to flip my lot 36, and I'm very seriously thinking about doing just that, and selling lot 36, and you know, possibly buying one of their lake lots on Kentucky Lake, you know, Tennessee River. So that takes us to the question of the day, which comes from my mom. Hi, Mom. My mom asks, Troy, in your part 1 video, you showed the hollers and they were all white. Why are the hollers all white? Well, I believe that's for 3 reasons. #1, I think I didn't quite have the color balance right on my drone. I was just learning how to use the drone, and I like to do a lot of the manual settings, so I might not have had the ISO quite right or whatever. However, they are still very, very light colored, and at that time of year, which brings me to the second reason. The second reason is it was the first week of April when that drone footage was taken, and that was before any of the hardwoods were blooming. So there are no leaves on any of the trees, and they do look, you know, white from up above. like that. So that would be the second reason. And the third reason is, you know, trees look a lot different from the ground and from the sky. We are getting very close to sharing some build videos. The actual shovel in the ground, you know, dig projects have already started, and I can't wait to share them all with you. If you found this content valuable and you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel, ring the bell so you get notified when I drop new videos. Comment if you have any questions. I love hearing questions so I can answer in my question of the day. And finally, like my video. And I will see you in the next video. Well, I'm sure most of you have already left. A few dedicated souls may still be watching. So I thought I'd do something a little special here. And it's May 3rd. Mother's Day is coming up on May 8th, 5 days from now. It's going to take me a little bit to finish up editing and get this video uploaded. So I'm thinking it's going to probably come out around Mother's Day. So I'm going to use this opportunity to dedicate this video to my wonderful mother, who has been there every step of the way for me. My #1 fan. And, you know, been my rock and support through all this whole process. She's so proud of me, and she has friends over. They all gather on the couch and watch my videos on the TV. I have the best mom ever. So Mom, this video is for you. Happy Mother's Day. And I'll see you in person soon, not in the next video. Well, I'll see you in the next video too. But I'll see you real soon, Mother. Happy Mother's Day. I love you.